different as asked by the host. That is something what is research or that kind of thing. So I actually decides to explain you. That is, I'm not going to SPSS because it is a preliminary level class, and the SPSS things will be discussed by Shudip in the next session. Firstly, actually, there are the different things you can do with the SPSS, but today I'll start it with. That is basically, I have my lecture is divided in two parts. One is that is the designing of a research, and another part is that is when you deal with hardcore data. Then before going to the machine, that is before entering into the software, you have to know something, that is what actually the data behavior is, how you have to control over the data. And by looking at the data, you have to that is you make some you have to identify your research objectives, and then to go to that particular research objectives, you have to collect the data in by such a way. I'm not going into entering into the sampling process or that kind of things, but in that econometric part, we actually discuss some basic idea, that is as students of social science, because it is a blended platform, various social science participants are there. So you have to know something regarding the data character before going to the software stage. So I will go to the sharing my screen. Is it visible to all?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it
Yes,
is
sir.
visible.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
The screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's the topic today I will go to discuss. That is the research methods, basically the methodology part, but not the whole methodology. What we mean by the research methods, that is some part, that is mainly the research designing part, and some econometric analysis. So I'm started with that a research process, which actually initial steps happen to be that of selecting the proper definition of a research problem. That means a researcher must find the problem and formulate it so it becomes a beautiful research. It is like when a medical person treating a patient. So what he will do, that is examine the symptoms that is observed by him, and considering the problem, he can he uses diagnostic process, and we are also doing the same thing in case of research. So what is a research problem? In general, that is, it refers to it is difficult for us to define a research problem. That is, researcher experience a context in terms of theoretical and practical situations, and what we want to get the solution for the same. And usually we say that a research problem actually exists if the following conditions are hold. If there is any disturbance in visualizing, or that is hearing my voice, you can just interrupt me and ask.
Sir,
Yeah.
স্যার প্রেজেন্টেশনটা মনে হয় শো করছে না, ডার্ক স্ক্রিনটা দেখাচ্ছে।
1 minute. এবার কি শো করছে?
হ্যাঁ স্যার, এবার শো করছে।
ওকে ওকে, এখন শো করছে, মানে ফুল মোডে গেছি তো আমি।
হ্যাঁ
Okay,
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
okay. So that is the research problem. Considering when you are dealing with research problem, there are some basic conditions we have to meet. That is, first one is that is there must be an individual. There must be an individual. It may not be an individual. It may be a group or organizations. So it may be organizations or groups. That is not only it is the case of the individuals, and later these individuals whose problem we have to deal with. That is the problem of the individual. So individual or the organizations, and they are occupied by some environment. So just consider the variables. We consider the variable like individual. We consider or it may be the organizations, and then the environment. And there must be some uncontrolled variable. There must be some uncontrolled variable. So this is your set. Where set is dealing with the individual or some group or some organizations, and there are some environment. That means there are some problems. Rather, environment is dealing with the problems, and there are some uncontrolled variables. That means these variables are not controlled. You cannot control the variables. Now there is another important thing, that is the course of action. So there are different types of course of different versions of course of actions rather. So what is a course of action? A course of action which is defined one by one. That is as per your. I first tell you about the uncontrolled variable, but we reform the uncontrolled variable in the form of some control variable. So a course of action is defined by one or more values of the control variables. For example, the number of items purchased in a specific time. This is a course of action. Because you have to purchase something. This is the course of action. So there are different types of course of actions. And there must be some possible outcomes. So the course of actions, when you take the course of actions, there should be the outcomes, and which are preferable in terms of the preference relation. That means this is preferred, this outcome is preferred to me in compared to the other. That means there must be at least one outcome in research. That means there must be one outcome, at least one outcome. There may be various outcomes, but at least one outcome from research. And that outcome is identified as objective of research. Okay. So there are some chances, there are some probability. That is the probability of taking a particular course of actions. That means whether you decide, so you have to go to the shops and purchase something. So you have to decide, you have to order it by Amazon, by this kind of thing. So that is everywhere it is purchasing, but you can go by different modes, and there are some different outcomes also. So your objective is this, that is which outcome you get from the research. Similarly, in case of research, and there the probability of such course of outcomes, and the probability of also the course of action. So if we identify the individual as I and the environment, that is where the individual is dealing with, that is the N, and the uncontrolled variable as Y. And suppose we have two course of actions and we get the two outcomes. Then in research, what we are doing basically, we have to define a good probability of the first outcome. So say for it is first outcome in compared to between O1 and O2. Suppose O1 is preferable. So the probability of O1, what are the given things to me? The given things are the individual, given things are the course of actions, and the given things are the environment. And obviously, it is obvious that if the course of action is, look, the other variables have some unique value, but the course of action may be different. So as your course of action changes, this probability is also changing. This is the idea of research problem. That is, when we are dealing with first course of action, that is C1, the probability is given as the probability of O1 given this I, C1 and N. And this is not equal with the probability of the same event O1, same outcome O1, when the course of action is different. So this is the basic things. In simple words, we can say that the choice must be unequal efficiencies for desired outcomes. This is the basic thing. So considering these conditions, individuals or organizations can be said to have a problem only if you know what is your best course of actions. If you are in doubt, then it becomes a problem. If you know what is your best course of actions, then you get the best outcome. But if you have some doubt in your course of actions, then obviously you do not guess about the outcomes. So individuals or a group of persons can say to have a problem, which can be technically identified as research problem if what is the definition of the research problem? If individuals having one or more desired outcomes and are confronted with more than one course of actions, have some but not equal efficiencies. That means there may be equal efficiencies, there may not be equal efficiencies, and there must be the situations of doubt regarding the course of action. So if I make the gist, what are the things? That is, there must be an individual or a group which has some difficulty, and that is defined as problem, and there must be some objective to be attained. If one wants nothing, we cannot have a problem. If everyone wants something, then we have to face some problem. In case of research, also the same thing. And there must be an alternative means for getting the objective. These alternative means are what? These are the course of actions. And that means there must be at least minimum level 2 course of actions will be available to a researcher. If you have no other course of actions in compared to the thing, that means that is not a research, because that is a certain thing. So there must be alternative means for obtaining the objectives, and there must remain some doubts in minds of researcher. Regarding the selection of alternatives. This means researcher must answer the question concerning the relative efficiency of the possible alternatives. So then there must be some environments where we are living, where we are doing work in a difficult way. Therefore, what is in a gist? The researcher problem is one that requires a researcher to get the best solution for the given problem. That means to find out which course of action the objective can be attained optimally in the context of given environment. There are the several factors which may result in making problem complicated. Environment may change, affecting the efficiency of the course of actions. Your environment is also changing as per your choice of the course of actions. Number of alternative actions may be very large. So we have faced the difficulty. These are the research problem. Then when the course of actions are very large in number, then the task is difficult for us. So the persons not involved in making decisions may be affected by it and reacted to favorably or unfavorably. And then we have to get selection of a research problem. That is, you have to select a research problem. So research problem undertaken for the study, we have to be careful for that. And the task is a difficult one. Why? Because it is not appear to us. Every time you know the problem, but it is a difficulty how to describe the problem. Every researcher must find out its one way of regarding the statement of a research problem. It cannot be borrowed. So we have see ourselves and from our individual points of view regarding a research, regarding suppose the same objective, we are looking differently, and observing these points, what are the good thing, what are the characters of selection of research problem? That is first one is subject. That is, you have to select a subject which is overdone, should not be normally chosen. But it is difficult task, it is easy to understand. Controversial subjects should be avoided. So we not consider the controversial subjects. Too narrow, too large problems should be avoided. We do not consider very specific because then it becomes a work of a paper rather than your thesis work. In case of the paper work, we can consider the narrow research problems, but in case of thesis work, we consider it to some extended it some level. And fourthly, the subject selected for research should be familiar and feasible. Why it is familiar and feasible? Because the related research material or sources is within one's reach. That means it is under me. Even then it is quite difficult to supply the definite ideas concerning a researcher should obtain the idea for his research. For example, a researcher should contact an expert, suppose, during his research in a university, who is already engaged in research. Then what is the added thing? That is he can increase your exposure over the things. And fifthly, the importance of the subject, that is depends upon the qualifications, training, how you handle the software, this kind of things. That is whether he is well equipped in terms of background to carry out the research, whether the study falls within the budget he can afford, and whether the necessary cooperations can be obtained from those who must participate in the research. And the sixth one is the selection. That is how you select the thing. That is selection problem of your preliminary study. This may not be necessary when your problem requires the conduct of sometimes for example, when you are going to some primary survey based work, we are doing some small survey before conducting the primary survey. That is also the thing. So this is the selections of the research problem. And next one is why it is necessary. Sometimes we all heard about that your problem is not clearly stated. It is half solved. This statement actually specifies the need for defining the research problem. So the research problem to be investigated must be defined in an unambiguous way, which help us to discriminate the relevant data from the irrelevant one. Because there are various sources of data, you have to choose the specific relevant one. So a proper definition of research problem will enable the researcher to define his goals, to define his objectives. Question like, for example, that is what data are to be collected, what characteristics of data are relevant and needed to be studied, what relations are to be explored, what techniques are to be used for the purpose. And similarly, various questions, such questions actually defining the research problem properly in a prerequisite for any study. And it is the most important stage of the research. And the formulation problem, it is often more essential, that is concerning the research problem. Now the technique involved in defining a problem, for example, you can start by question, what does what does one mean when he wants to define a research problem? The answer may be that one wants to state the problem along within the boundary within which it is to be studied. That is defining a problem involves the task of laying down boundaries within which a researcher shall study the problem in a predetermined, as per his predetermined objectives. So it is a huge task that is defining a research problem. So when you're defining a research problem, various problems also actually surrounded us. For example, first one is statement of the problem in a general way. That is suppose the problem should be stated in a broad general way. So keeping in view in some practical concern, scientific or intellectual interest concerning this, a researcher must immerse himself thoroughly and in the subject matter concerning which he wishes to pose a problem. In case of social research, basically, we consider the advisable to be done by some field observations. As such, the researcher may undertake some sort of preliminary survey, which is called pilot survey. Then the researcher can himself state the problem, or he can seek the guidance of the subject expert. But before going to the primary survey, you have to do some pilot survey, and collecting the result of the pilot survey, you go to some experts, some professors who has already done various types of works. So then a researcher actually becomes it is possible for the researcher to narrow down the phase of the problem in operational terms. That means there are some directives from the organizational authority, and the problem can be stated accordingly. So problem stated in a broad general way may contain various ambiguities and which can be resolved by thinking and rethinking over the problem. Second one is understanding the nature of the problem. So understand the origin and nature of the problem. It is a very important thing. So best way to do this is to discuss it with those who first raise it, in order to find out if it is raised by your own mind. Then what you will do? You go to the literature side. That is the review of literature you have to do. So the researcher has stated the problem himself. He should consider once again all those points and induce him to make a general statement concerning the problem. For a better understanding the nature of the problem, for example, it involves various discussions which create a good knowledge about the problem, and the researcher should also keep in view the environment within which problem has to be studied or understood. And third one is surveying the earlier sketch. Everyone know that is what we will do when we consider a research problem. There are the various ways regarding the earlier sketches. That is how you have to draw the earlier sketches. That is the earlier reviews. So one first, depending on its objective, one first go to the initial level. Then that is where the first work is done. Then what is happened? Then that means a historical background he has to be created. There are some other ways also. For example, very dynamic and up to date topic. What actually happening? That is we are concerning. Suppose we are doing a research work regarding the health expenditure of some rural people. Pattern of health expenditure. Then what we will do? Then we are concerning with the very recent things, that is very recent studies what we are doing, and after reading the very recent studies, we have to define that is what is happening concerning the previous studies. So Knowing what data are available often serves a narrow to the problem itself. It's a well technique and that can be used. So this would also help the researcher to know if there are certain gaps in theories. You can identify the research gap, whether the existing theories are applicable to the problem and the study. If the studies are inconsistent, then you can find out. Then you can try to bridge the gap of the research by creating another research. So all these will enable a researcher, that is, to take a new view in the field of knowledge. He can move off, that is, studying the existing premises. And the fourth one is developing ideas through discussions. That means you have to make some experience survey. That is, discussion concerning the problems often produce useful informations, and by using those informations, you can create your new ideas from where you can generate the work. And last one is rephrasing the research problem. Then you rephrase your research problem. You first identify the problem in a way. After doing these things, that is the from the backdrop of good understanding, from the backdrop of surveying of the earlier sketches, from discussions with different individuals on this research. That is what you are doing. You are rephrasing the research problems. And then what is happened? Then the research problem turns into a working proposition. So once the nature of the problem has been clearly understood, the environment, that is the environment I am telling earlier, that has been defined. When you identify, when you rephrase your research problem, then your environment is clearly defined, and discussion of the problems have taken place then, and the available literatures are already surveyed or examined, and then it is not difficult task for you to go further. So now I am entering one part of the research problem, that is the designing of the research. So what do you mean by research designing, or how you design your research? There are some several ways. We will discuss this later on one by one. So it is a preparation. It is the preparations, rather what is research designing? It is the preparation. Those who are interested to submit a research project in different organizations like ICSSR or ICHR or UGC, then you have to design your research. And when you are designing your research, you have to take decisions. That is the general question. That is what, where, when, how, what means. That is concerning the inquiry or a research of the study, and that constitutes a research. So a research design is the arrangement of conditions for collection and analysis of data in a manner that aims to be combined relevance to the research purpose with economy and by particular procedure. This is the research design. And the conceptual structure, that is it considered, for example, collection, measurement, and analysis of data. Research designing is dealing with what? That is, it collects, it measures, and it analyzes the data. So such designing includes what researcher will do from, for example, writing hypotheses, operational implications, final data analysis, these things. So research, when you are construct a research designing, what is your first question? What is the study about? Then, why is the study being made? Where will the study be carried out? What type of data is required? Where can the required data be found? What time periods we will include? What specific form of sample design you have to follow? And what techniques of data collection will be used? And then the data analysis part, and in what style you have to prepare your report. These 10 questions actually formulate the report, the research design. So keeping in this view of the above stated decisions, these decisions regarding the research design, we can split the overall research design into the following parts. Basically, all the 10 questions are divided in 4 following parts. One is what? One is sampling design. That means it deals with the methodology of your study. That is which particular methods you have to follow. Just 1 minute. So after the sampling design, am I audible and the screen is visible to all?
Yes, sir. Is it
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Second thing is observational design. What is this? That means it relates the conditions under which the observations are to be made. Third one is statistical design. I'm pardon this design. There is a mistake in the spelling. The statistical design, which concern with the questions, how many items are to be observed and how the information and data gathered are to be analyzed. This is the statistical design. And the fourth one is the operational design. When you are dealing with the SPSS, these steps you have to you have make some clear idea regarding this. That is, what is the sampling design? That is the other thing. So if you are doing with the secondary data, there is no such things. But if you are dealing with, for example, NFHS data, what you will do? You will extract the NFHS, and if you deal with NSS data, that is National Sample Survey data, NSSO, then what you will do? You will extract the NSSO data in Stata, and after extracting, you can choose a sample from that data. Then you have to do some sampling design. So from secondary data set, the sampling design is not needed. This is not the thing. You can consider the NFHS 5 data set. And from that NFHS 5 data set, you can make choice of some sample by proper designing your sampling work. That is your designing. That is your sampling process. And the operational design is work that deals with the techniques, which procedures specified in sampling, statistical designing this. So from what has been stated this in this slide, we can make concrete by in three sentences. That is, it is a plan that specifies about the sources and what can I say? That is a type of information relevant to the research problem. Number 2 is it is a strategy which specify which approves all be used for gathering and analyzing the data, and it also includes the time and cost budget, since most studies are done under these two constraints. So in brief, that is a clear statement of you have to make a clear statement of the research problem, procedures and techniques to be used for gathering information, and the population to be studied you have to be identified, and the methods to be used in processing and analyzing the data. That is another important thing. So what is why such research designing is needed? Research designing is needed because it serves your work very smooth. That is regarding your various research operations. You can smoothly go through such type of research designing. That makes your research more efficient as possible, yielding maximum informations with minimum expenditure or effort or time or money. It gives us economical and attractive constructions of the total research work, and we can make this work before entering into the actual work. That is, we have to make a proper planning of this, and that is your designing work. So research design stands for advanced planning of the methods to be adopted and to collect the relevant informations and techniques to be used in their analysis, keeping in the view what is the objective of the research, what is the availability to you, that is the time, money, the people who are going to collect your data. And the preparation of research designing should be done with great care, and you have to minimize the error. So research designing, in fact, is a great bearing on reliability of the study. When you are collecting your data and put it in the SPSS, then you can check the reliability of the data. That is, there are some techniques by which you can check the reliability. So if the data is sometimes we have to do some manufacturing of the data, your reliability property is disturbed. So why research designing is actually needed. Proper research designing is needed. Even then, the need for a well thought out research designing is at a time, and we are not realized it. So the importance which this problem deserves is not given to it. As a result, many research, in case of many research, this purpose is not served, and ultimately what will bring to us, that is the misleading conclusions. So that is what thoughtlessness in designing research projects, actually rendering the research exercise in a fertile way. That is therefore the efficient, to get an efficient and appropriate designing for the research operations. The design helps the researcher to organize and to bring the adequate, efficient results if your designing is proper. So you have to do some efficiency concerning when you are dealing with the research designing, some efficient kind of things, and then you have to do some advanced planning for this. You have to minimizing your error, you have to manage your time, and you have to find out a solution which is critically evaluated. This is the need for research design. So a good designing is often characteristics by some objective, like your research must be flexible, your research must be appropriate, your research is efficient, it is economic, and so on. So the features of good design, that is the designing which minimize the bias and maximize the reliability. What is a good design? What is the features of a good design? That minimize the biasness and maximizes the reliability of the data collected and analyzed is considered as good design. So design which gives the smallest experimental errors, that is considered as the best designing in many investigations. Similarly, a design which yields a maximal information and provides an opportunity for considering different aspects of a problem is considered the most appropriate and efficient design in respect of various research problems. Thus, the question of good design is related to the purpose or objective of the research problem, and it also the nature of the problem. You have to study the nature of the problem, and a designing may be quite suitable in one case, but maybe not unsuitable for the other case. So that things you have to remind. So one single design cannot serve the purpose of all type of research problem. In various research problems, there are the various type of research designing. You cannot frame it by a particular way. So research design is appropriate for a particular research problem. Usually they have some common properties. What are the common properties? That means first one is research. In case of research designing, first important feature is that it has some features like it means for, that is some obtaining informations. You get the informations from a research design, and the availability of skills of the researchers, that is also important. The objective of the problem you have to be fixed. The nature of the problem you have to be studied, and the availability of time and money. This kind of things are the features of it, are the common features of different research design. So a researcher study happens to, suppose for example, an exploratory study or a formulated study, which is a major emphasis on discovery of ideas and insights, and research designing is the most appropriate for such cases. So, but when the purpose of the study is accurate and the descriptions of a situations or the association between the variables or the accuracy, then the accuracy becomes a major considerations, and the research designing performs at its optimum level. This is the most difficult task for a particular study or for a particular group, when the research objective we have to fix. So next, that is concepts of research design. So before going to describe the different types of research designing, it is explain the various concepts which are related with the research design. First one is identification of dependent and independent variable. That means it means a concept which can take on different quantitative values. We identified it as a variable. For example, which is measurable, weight, height, income. These are the examples of variable. Similarly, there may be attributes. There may be qualitative phenomena that are also quantified on the basis of presence or absence. Okay, that may be quantified in the presence or absence. Then you have to identify which influence one. In case of my discussion in econometric part, I have to discuss this dependent and independent part thoroughly. That is which variable is influencing one and which variables is influenced. That is the case of the dependent and independent variable. So on the basis of this dependent and independent variable, your research hypothesis that you have to go into test, that also depend on this. And second one is after defining the dependent and independent variable, that is there may be some extraneous variable. For example, extraneous variable is very important role. In econometrics, we treat this problem as a problem of endogeneity. For what is endogeneity, I'm just explaining. For example, suppose you are going to find out a causal relation between consumption and suppose it is not consumption. Suppose it is wage. Wage is the dependent variable, and your independent variable is suppose your ability. Suppose on the basis of suppose there are the two independent variables. It may be one is educational status, another is ability. Now, when you find out for the data, you collect the data of wage from the individual by some proper methodology, and you get the data of education and ability. When you go to collect the data, you find that you get the data of wage and education level, but you cannot get the data of ability. But what is your theoretical construction? Theoretical construction is that wage depends on two things. That is, one is education, another is ability. What we will do then? Should we drop the ability factor? If we drop the ability factor, then our theoretical model is affected. Our theoretical model is breakdown. So, under such situation, we consider this problem in econometrics as a problem of endogeneity. This is endogenous variables. Ability is endogenous. But then what we'll do? We'll use some instrument for this. We have to use some instrument which have some proper relations with the ability, and we replace the ability by that variable. This is known as instrumental variable method. Whatever may be. Then the important thing is that is the control. What is your control group and what is your original group? That means you are concerning what is the control variables. That is in an experiment, hypothesis testing research, when a group is exposed to used condition, that is termed as control group. But when the group is exposed to some novel or special condition, it is termed as experimental. So control means what? Suppose in a city, we are in a city, there is an announcement that a nuclear power plant will be established. Then what will happen? Normal things is that the prices of the flats near the place where the nuclear plant will be established will be reduced by considering the rumor. Will be affected. So you have to consider, when you are considering some study over the housing price, then you have to consider some distance from the nuclear power plant and how many houses or what houses are within the 3 kilometers radius from the nuclear and what are the outside the 3 kilometers. That means here you considering the first 3 kilometers houses, then these are identified as the control group. That is, they are exposed to some usual conditions. And this group, control group, and another is what? Another is experimental group. So we can consider this between these two groups, the house prices, and then we found a relations. That is, what is the relationship between these two? After confounding the relation between the control group and the experimental group, what we are doing? We are framing a research hypothesis. We are framing some research hypothesis. And when you are going to framing some research hypothesis, in your statistical methods, how to frame the research hypothesis. Normally, how the hypothesis is framed? That is, suppose you are concerning that consumption is influenced by income. So what we will do? We'll collect some data and find out what is the coefficient of between the income and consumption. What is the coefficient of income? It actually shows the coefficient of income. It shows what is the relation between income and consumption. And from that coefficients, if we go to frame some research hypothesis, we have to establish, suppose that coefficient is positive. That means what? That means income is positively influencing consumption. But you have to frame two types of hypotheses. One is null hypothesis and another is alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis is that one, what is actually not happening. What actually you are not feeling. What you are feeling? You are feeling that there are some causal relationship between income and consumption. That means the coefficient of income is not 0. But in your null hypothesis, you consider it as 0. And in research hypothesis, we frame the research hypothesis by that way. And experimental and non-experimental hypothesis is this. That means where the control group and the experimental group is there, the experimental hypothesis. And when there is no such control kind of groups, when you are general study, you are not considering the impact evaluation of that kind of study, there is no experimental hypothesis. And then the experimental, already mentioned, experimental in the control group. And then the treatments. What is the treatments? There is the different conditions under which that experimental and control groups are put, and usually they are put there and usually passing through some treatment. That is if the nuclear power plant will be there, how the individuals or how the house prices within 3 kilometers or more than 3 kilometers behaves. That is the illustration of the treatment. So treatments gives us some comparative impact between different instrument what we used in case of agriculture, suppose impact of some fertilizers, in case of thermal power plant, impact of introduction of electrostatic precipitator. These kind of things you can define then what is happening before, what is happening now. And then the experiment, that is you are doing the statistical kind of things using SPSS, that is relating to some research problems. You have some research problems, and that is known as experiment, and conduct your experiment, examine the usefulness of the newly adopted objectives. And experiments are two types, that is absolute and comparative experiment. If you want to determine the impact of something, that is something, suppose some fertilizer on the yield of the crop, then it is the case of absolute experiment. But if you want to determine the impact of one fertilizer as compared to the impact of other fertilizer, that experiment is called as comparative experiment. These are two types of experiment. And then the experimental units, that is the predetermined plots or the blocks or the villages where the treatments were used, that is the experimental units. So different research designs are there. One is exploratory research, another is basically we will discuss these two types, that is one is exploratory research, another is descriptive and diagnostic research. So when we define the research designing, the different types of research designing, that is research designing, basically three types. That is, one is exploratory research studies, another is descriptive or diagnostic research studies, another is hypothesis testing type of research studies. That is I am not discussing here. So when you go to exploratory research studies, first research designing exploratory research studies are basically formulate some research studies. That is, main purpose of these studies is that formulating a problem in more precise way for developing the working hypothesis from an operational that is point of view. That is the major emphasis on in such studies is the creation of the new ideas or the insights. As such, research designing is appropriate for the studies that must be flexible enough to provide opportunity for considering different aspects of a problem under the study. Inbuilt flexibility, what is generating in research designing by such kind of exploratory study, and it transformed into one or more precise meaning of exploratory study, which may necessitate changes in case of research procedures, gathering relevant data, gathering relevant informations. So exploratory study basically depends on survey of concerning literature. That is I have already discussed. That is when you are going to your earlier works, that is it is the most suitable one. It is the most simple and fruitful method to you for formulating precisely the research problem or developing hypothesis. So the hypothesis stated earlier, may be reviewed. If you already formulated your hypothesis, through the review, after going through the survey of literature, you can review, you can rethink about it. And bibliographical survey of studies, these are also including under this part. Second one is experience survey. What is experience survey? It means the survey of the people who had practical experience with the problem to be studied. That is the subject. That is the subject of the survey is gives some insight into the relationship between the variables and brings new ideas into the research problem. So for such a survey, people who are competent can contribute new ideas, may carefully selected for the respondents. When you are going to survey field, you have to identify them properly by proper research methodology, and the respondent to be selected they interviewed by the investigator after this kind of careful selection. But the interview method, it must follows the flexibility. That means respondents should be allowed to raise a issue or questions which the investigator has not previously considered. It is not mentioned in your questionnaire, but from the respondents you get the knowledge about that questions. And the third one is the analysis of insight simulation. That is analysis of examples. It is also a fruitful method for suggesting hypothesis for a research, and it is particularly suitable in the areas of little experience to serve as a guide. So the method consists of the extensive study of the selective instance of the phenomenon in which one is interested. And the descriptive, in case of descriptive and diagnostic study, that is, in case of descriptive and diagnostic study, what we found, that is the objective formulation. That is what objective you have to follow, and then that is considering your research ideas, you have to follow the objective. You have to consider the objective. That is, descriptive research are those studies which are concerned with describing the character of a particular individual or a group, whereas the diagnostic research, which studies determine the frequency with which that is something occurs or its association with something else, this kind of things. So the studies concerning with the certain variables are associated with the example of diagnostic research. Those are not present in the descriptive research. So most of the social research comes under these categories, either exploratory or the descriptive or the diagnostics. So in descriptive as well as diagnostic studies, researcher must be able to define clearly what he wants to measure and must find the adequate method for measuring it, along with a clear-cut definition of population. That is, what is my population? You have to first, in case of diagnostic study and descriptive study, you have to define your population. Since the aim is to obtain a complete or accurate information in the said studies, the procedure is used, and you have to carefully plan about this. So designing of such studies, you have to make some rigidities in case of designing, and must focus on formulation of the objective of the study. That is why the study is about and why it is being made. Next one is designing the methods of data collections. That is what techniques of gathering information is adopted by you. Third one is selecting the sample. That is how the material will, how much such material will be needed. That means what is your sample size. Collection of data. That is where can be required data be found, and with what time period should the data related. Then the processing and analyzing of the data, and then the report findings. So the descriptive or diagnostic study, the first step is to specify the objective with sufficient precision, which ensure that the data collected are relevant one and significant one as per your research question. So data collected must be processed and analysis. This includes like coding. In case of analysis part, you use coding with the interview replies and the observation, tabulation of your data, and the statistical computations, gross descriptive statistics calculations like mean, median, quartile deviations, this. So thus all such research design of the descriptive diagnostic study is a comparative designing, throwing the light in all points narrated, and must be prepared keeping the view of the objective of the study and the resource available. So it must ensure the minimization of bias and maximization of reliability of the evidence collected. So the type of study, if we consider the difference between the research designing in respect of the exploratory and the descriptive, there is overall designing in exploratory study. It is a flexible design, And in descriptive, it is something, some type of rigidity is there. And when you are going to sampling, in case of sampling about your research work, when you go to primary sample survey, what is the sampling design? If it is exploratory study, then you have to follow non-probability sampling. If it is descriptive, you have to record some probability sampling. What is the statistical design? That is, no pre-planned design is there required in case of exploratory, but in case of descriptive, it must be pre-planned designs. What is your observational design? That is some unstructured instruments, and here in case of descriptive, there are some structured instruments. And in case of operational design, you have no fixed decisions, but in case of descriptives, you have to make some decisions. So experimental design is actually described by Professor Fisher, R.A. Fisher, and that is experimental designs are basically divided in different categories. That is principle of replication, principle of randomizations, and principle of local control. Three methods are there. So first we consider the some important experimental design. That is, experimental design refers to some framework or structure of an experiment such that there are several experimental designs is available to you. Then you can classify the experimental design in two categories. One is informal experimental design, and this formal experimental. Informal experimental designs are what? Those designs that normally use less sophisticated form of analysis based on difference in magnitudes, whereas formal designs that is relatively more control and use precise statistical questions. And in case of informal, first we starting with the informal experimental designs. That is, first process is before and after without control design. In such a design, a single test group or area is selected first. So you have to select a particular test group or area. Just 1 minute. And after selecting a particular test group or area, then the independent variable is measured before the introduction of the treatment. That is, the treatment is then introduced and the dependent variable is measured again after the treatment has been introduced. So dependent variable is measured 2 times. That is, first one is before the treatment, and another one is after the treatment. So then you get the treatment effect. That is, here it is identified as difference between Y and X. So the effect of treatment would be equal to the level of the phenomenon after the treatment minus the level of phenomenon before the treatment. And the main difficulty of such designing is that with the passage of time, considerable extraneous variations may be there in the treatment effect. That means what? That is, what is the situation when in the before treatment period, the situation, the environment is completely changed when we are going to dealing with the after treatment. That means various endogenous variables may be entered into the environment, and that will affect the treatment effect also. So why it is not considered as a good method, that is before and after without control design. And second one is after only with control design. So what is the idea? In this design, 2 groups of areas. First one is on only one area, but here I consider the 2 groups of areas, that is test area and the control area, are selected, and then treatment introduced into the test area only. Then the dependent variable is then measured for both area at the same time. Treatment impact is assessed by subtracting the value of the dependent variable in the control area and from the value of the test area. That means there are the 2 groups. One is treatment group, another is control group. So in the test area, there are the 2 areas. One is test area, another is non-test area, that is the control area. So in the test area, what you get the effect after treatment, and in the control area, there is no influence of the treatment. So what is the effect? That means there are the two places, two areas, and making the differences, you can get the form. So the basic assumption of such design is that two areas are identical with respect to their behavior towards the phenomenon considered, and if the assumption is not true, there is a possibility of extraneous, again like before, extraneous invariations entering into the treatment effect. That means the effect of endogeneity. However, the data can be collected in such a design, and in various economic studies, various studies of sociology, specifically, such kinds of designing is used. And however, the data can be collected by such a way that is without the introduction of the problem with the passage of time. In this respect, the design is superior to before and after without control design. And the next one is before and after with control design. In this design, what is the thing? That is, the two areas are selected and the dependent variable is measured in both the areas for an identical time periods before treatment. That is, before treatment, you have to consider the dependent variable for the both areas, and the treatment is then introduced in the test area only, and the dependent variable is measured in both for an identical time periods after the introduction of the treatment. So the treatment effect, which is determined by subtracting the changes of the dependent variable in the control area and from the changes in dependent variable in the test area. So this designing can be followed by this way. This designing is superior in compared to the before mentioned two designing. That is, it avoids endogeneity because it consider both the passage of time from the non-comparability of the test and in the control areas also. But at times, due to lack of historical data, that is time or comparable control area, we should prefer to select one of the first two informal designs stated. And the second one is the formal experiment. Formal experiment, first method is that is a complete randomized design. What is the complete? That involves two principles: the principles of replications and the principles of randomizations of the experimental design. It is the simplest possible design and the procedure to understand. Why it is very easy to understand. That is, what are the essential characters of this design is that which are randomly assigned to an experiment, and vice versa. For instance, if we have suppose subjects, if we have subjects that are randomly assigned to some experiment, to some experiments as we use, that is, suppose there are 10 subjects, and if we use to test 5 under treatment A and 5 under treatment B, the randomizations process gives every possible group of 5 such subjects selected from a set of 10 with equal opportunity being assigned to treatment A and treatment B. In statistics, in SPSS, this is identified as one-way ANOVA. That is one-way analysis of variance, and which is used to analyze such a design. And in case of through ANOVA, we are considering such a design. By unequal replications can also work in this design, and it provides maximum number of degrees of freedom to the error. So I'll discuss it in the econometric analysis. So two groups simple random design is describing here. In a two group simple randomized design, first all the populations are defined, and then from the population a sample is selected randomly, and then we requirement of the designing of that items is being selected randomly from the population by random assignment of the experiment and the experimental and the control group. So we divide the random assignment to the experimental group and the control group, and such random assignments of the item two groups is technically described as principle of randomization. This is called the division between the random assigns into the experimental and the control group. This is called the principle of randomizations. Thus, such design yields two groups as representative of the populations. Since the simple randomized design, the elements constituting the samples are randomly drawn from the same populations and randomly assigned to the experimental and control groups, it becomes possible to draw the conclusion on the basis of the sample applicable for the populations. So two groups of such design are given different treatments of the independent variable. The design of experiment is quite common in case of research studies, and the merit of such designing is that it is simple and randomized also in terms among the different among the different samples. So if this is the two group simple random design. Another one is random replications design. The two groups, what we discussed before, that is the two groups randomized designing, it has some certain limitations. It usually eliminate within the random replication design. So to remove such problem, we consider the random experiment design, and the random experiment designing. For example, that is each repetition is technically called a replication. Random applications designing serves two purposes. It provides control to differential effects of the extraneous independent variable, and the second one is randomizes any individual treatment among those that is conducting the treatments. So in the figure, the population is identified, and from the that is available for the study, and another is available to conduct the treatment. So there are two different population groups, and from the two different population groups, same like before, that is the two group randomized design is continuing, and after coming to the random selection, then sample for the study group and for the treatment group, then random assignment, and we can make some random assignment over the for example, here we are showing the 8 groups, and considering the effects of both one is non-control, the one is control, and another is treatment group. And the independent variable is what is affecting, that is the treatment A and the treatment B. That is the independent or the causal variable. So there are the several things, like there are the other things also like this. That is it is also in case of that is randomized block designing, is a randomized block designing. And what is happening here, that is the experiments, the subjects are first divided into different groups, such as within each group the subjects are relatively homogeneous. For example, from that is a very low IQ, the student A, form 1, this is the marks, form 2, this is the marks, form these are the actually this column wise thing is actually the showing the homogeneity, but it may be heterogeneous when you are moving along the row. So there are some homogeneity in certain respects. Then we can consider the randomized block designing, and the variable selected for grouping of the subjects is that believed to relate the measures to get the dependent variable, and the number of subject is given block should be some number of represent some number of treatments, and each block should be randomly assigned for the treatments. So suppose in this example, suppose 4 different forms of a standard test of statistics is given to each of the 5 students. So the students, they scored, and the scores are showing. So each student separately randomized the order in which he or she that is took into the 4th test by using the random number in a similar device, and we refer this design as a randomized block design. So the purpose of the randomization is to take care here by considering the possible extraneous endogenous factors, and for perhaps it experience gained from repeatedly taking the test. So this is the randomized block design, and there is other methods also. These are not very useful in case of our that is social science research. This is the Latin square is useful for the literature based surveys, and there is some factorial design. Now I am come to the second part, that is the econometric part of my lecture. How much time? So that is when you have some data, when you get the data by following a proper methodology, you go to the field and chooses the sample and collect the information from the sample first, or before, when you are designing your research. First, we have to observe something. So what do you observe? That is for example, how people consume, how spend, how on, etc. So then what we are doing? That is in what the story I have already told you, that is now in easier form. Then what we are doing? We actually are hypothesizing a causal relationship, and it is basically the causal relationship is basically depends upon observations. But such causal relationship, that is what about your thinking, it does not shows the direction of causation, that is which influence. For example, when the consumption, whether if there are the two variables like consumption and income, whether consumption causes income or income causes consumption, so we go to causation. So income, if it is as per the theory of the consumption function, if we know the income causes consumption, then purely it generates some economic. There must be some. It is generated from some economic or social theory. Then after this, after this observation, then we go to some mathematical relation. That is, we formulate a mathematical relation as directed by the framed research ideas. For example, here consumption is equal to alpha plus beta income. That means that is income increases, consumption will increases, and the restrictions, given the restrictions over some alpha and beta. That is a mathematical relationship. If you know the income, if you know the consumption, then you can get some mathematical relationship between income and consumption by putting the things, and there are the several techniques to get the things. But what is a statistical relation? Now, so first we fix some causations, then we fix some mathematical relations, then we come to some statistical relation. What is the difference between the mathematical relation and statistical relation? We formulate a mathematical relation as directed by our research ideas, but statistical relation is that mathematical relation is converted into the statistical relation. Why? Because mathematical relation is an exact relation. Mathematical relation is an exact relation. For example, here we are dealing with income and consumption. Income influences consumption, so we write income is equal to alpha plus beta consumption. Given the value of alpha beta for a given income, we can get a specific value of consumption. But is it hold in the reality? It does not hold. In reality, consumption not only depends on income, it depends on various factors like wealth, taste preference, blah, 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 so on. So even if it includes such variables in the mathematical model, there will remain such variable which influences the consumptions and may or may not known by us. So it is impossible to catch all such variables which influences consumption other than income. For some of such variables, we may not have some strong data supply, or they can observe only, but not in a quantitative form. For example, I am giving you the example of skill. So we cannot exactly predict the consumption function in statistical relation. So we cannot exactly predict what is the mathematical relation shows. We cannot exactly predict it because there are so many things influences consumption when we collect the data. Then why? That is the point why we need a statistical relation. And the statistical relation is what? That is consumption, that is suppose say yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi plus ui. What is this? What is this? That is the term which captures some unobserved effect. That means effect of other variables. We may not know about that. That is the other variables. For the different individuals, it have different values. So UI is the term which captures such unobserved effects. You may consider if the ability, if I do not get the data of ability, but I get the data of education and wage in our before stated example, then UI is the omitted variable other than income which influences consumptions. So UI may be treated as an omitted variable also. So this UI in statistical relation, we call it a random error or stochastic. We don't know anything about UI, but UI is not a we do not get any idea of UI, but UI is not a completely unknown thing. What is informed? What we know? We know the mean value of such error on unobserved fact is 0. And this error is distributed normally with 0 mean and a constant variance, that is sigma u square. What is the meaning of 0 mean? That means all stochastic error given the independent variable is 0. The mean value of all stochastic error given the independent variable is 0. That means expectation of UI given xi is equal to 0. That is the meaning. And UI follows a normal distribution with that means 0 and a constant variance, that is sigma square. This is the distributional assumption of the entire analysis. But look, if it is not, then what will happen? In reality, if it is maximum cases, we consider that it is not happening. So if then we are dealing with such relationship, that is x is the independent variable and y is the dependent variable. So such relationship is a functional relationship, and here yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi plus ui. If we consider only the alpha plus beta xi part, that is the mathematical relationship, it is called deterministic relationship. And when I consider yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi plus ui, this is called statistical relationship or stochastic relationship. So deterministic relationship is a mathematical relationship where for every unique value of x, we have some unique value of y, but statistical relationship is such a relation that for every unique value of income, there may not be some unique value of consumption. That means there will be some probability that consumption have some specific values. For example, I'm considering one example, that is YMR is equal to 12 plus 2XST plus XST squared. It is a relationship between YMR is what? That is the mobile data recharged by the students. And what is XST? That is XST is the students what receives the stipend from the college or universities. So from such relationship, for each and every specific values of student stipend, there are some specific values of YMR, that is the mobile recharge. But commonly in our real world, such exact relationship is a rare possibility. We consider two variables like stipend and mobile recharge here. But except stipend, there are the several other factors which are some influences the mobile data recharge. For example, it may be the facts like new release of a new season like Amazon Prime over Amazon Prime or Netflix. Then the deterministic model is failed to explain such influences. In case stochastic relationship is the way out, then what is happened? Then the dependent variable is not only a function of independent variable, it is also a function of stochastic influences. So how to capture such stochastic influences? It is better for us to know its source. What are the sources of such stochastic influences? That means what are the sources of U? Suppose a specialized thermometer of IMD collect the day temperature data. Now compare it our definition of production. So transformation of some inputs into outputs into technology, that is the definition of production. So the three facts: input, technology, and output, when you are considering the production definition. In case temperature data are the inputs, temperature data inputs, and that is the air temperature. Technology is the thermometer and what captures the thermometer data, and the output is the reading of the thermometer. Now the air temperature is in various places are of various types. But in Calcutta, in Purulia, in Santiniketan, this differs. So such rise in that is PM particles in the air, the automobiles, how many automobiles are there, the seasonal holidays are there. This will influences the air temperature. Similarly, this is one source of error. This is the one source of error. So why the Calcutta information may be different from Purulia or different from Santiniketan? Now consider another issue of technology, thermometers. There is a technology part. So there must be error in your input. There must be error in your input. Then in the technology part is dealing with the thermometer. Thermometer, the tools that is by which we are measuring the temperature data that is collected. So this thermometer are produced in some factories, and they are purchased by the IMD, Indian Meteorological Department. And there is also chance of reading imperfect temperature data. So there is error. So in the technology part is the error, and output part. Output is related to the reading of the temperature. Suppose it is observing the mercury level of 1, have to put it in the computer. Maybe there are some modern techniques, but the machines directly read the data. But if there is also a possibility of error, human error may be there. So every sources are there is a chance of error. These unobserved factors. So these are in time series. When you are dealing with the time series data, this error is called the white noise, and it may be there any levels of inputs. So there are some outside influences, inside influences, within the process influences of this kinds of error. So if we express this relationship in a stochastic relationship, then you have to add it the point, and it is called the stochastic error. And it measures the impact of all outside factors over the model. So how we make idea about the behavior of such white noise? Probability distribution will help us to make sense as how white noise influences over the models. And for example, suppose students stipend receives and they spends from that stipend on the mobile recharge. If this is the relationship, now there is a new season like Family Man 2 started in Amazon Prime. Then what will happen? Then for Family Man 2, he will spend ₹50 for a particular week. Then what will happen? Then your mathematical relationship is disturbed. So look, there must be some probability of releasing Family Man 2 in Amazon platform and probability of using the mobile data expenditure of the students. So that is the difference between the deterministic and stochastic relation. In deterministic relation, we get a particular value of the dependent for a particular value of the independent variable. But in stochastic relation, we can get various values of the dependent variable for a single value of the independent variable. So stochastic relation for any value of x, the value of y cannot be determined exactly, rather probabilistically. We can determine it in terms of probability. So when the true relation is not known between the variables, we explain the relationship by such probabilistic pattern. That is, in the relationship in this way, we have to define it in probabilistic pattern. When you done it, suppose the relationship is y is equal to alpha plus beta x plus some unobserved facts. Then what will happen if we plot the regression equation, that is relationship? I'm not considering the regression term now. If we consider the relationship, then for each and every, for example, suppose x value is x0 and y value is y0. Then on the line, the point is here. And how the error behaves? Error behaves like this normal distribution curve that is given above. That means there are for this x0, there are the various types of y's are there. Not only y0, it may be y1, it may be y2 under that particular normal curve. And those y1, y2 values are coming from that sources of u. That is different values of the error term. So that is such relationship between y and x is called a stochastic relationship. I actually try to give you the idea of what is a stochastic relationship. And alpha plus beta xi is the deterministic component and ui is the stochastic component, and they are in the additive form. They're in the additive form, that is alpha plus beta x plus u. It may not be in the additive, it may be multiplicative form. So the basic question arises is how UI is formed. And we are considering, discussed already here, that there are the three sources. It may be comes from the input sources, it may be comes from the technology sources, it may be come from the output sources. So suppose this is a data set. For example, the 5 students, that is how they recharge their mobiles. The stipend amount is different, that is giving 300, 500, 800, and so on. And the first week recharge of the first students, second week recharge of the first students, and all other students. So if this kind of things, look at the behavior, look at the mean of the first, that is the total and the average values of the first students and the second student and the third student. These are varied. So after getting such why this variation comes? This variation comes due to the presence of that error term. Such variations is occurred due to the presence of some stochastic disturbances. So now the next step is what? That is the sampling and the data collections. So when we have to collect the data on income and consumption of the selected individuals from a city, then how do you select the individuals? That is, you have to make some comment about the income consumption relationship of the city from the representation of the sample what you collected. So the sample selection is the most important part. I am not going to the details, different procedures of sample selection. That is another part, sampling theory, but I'm not coming to that. You have to follow some specific route. Specific means what? That is the scientific route. That is the acceptable route for the select the individuals, and which will truly represent the behavior of the overall village or overall city or the area. So suppose in the city, for example, city, one is rich, that is high income, another is poor with low income. So city population is 1,000, of which 300 are rich and 700 are poor. Then you have to select 50 individuals which represent the income consumption behavior of the 1,000 people of the city. One way of such that you select 35 individuals from the poor and 15 individuals from the rich group. Which 35 poor people will be selected? That is another problem. So sampling theory gives us a several way out. That is what commonly we are following, the random sampling method. And when you get the sample, we get when you are dealing with the sample, then we are dealing actually with the 3 types of data. One is cross section, that is data collected from several individuals, but for a particular time, say for a day or in a week. And suppose we collect the income consumption data of 500 individuals. So this is the data of income and consumption by so on. And if it is a time series, that is data of some individuals over several years. So look, here the data in this slide, the data of a particular variable, that is the temperature and the rainfall. They are the 2 variables. So suppose it is from 1st January to 31st December. That means what? That means 365 data points you get. And we consider the variation over the time periods, but no variation across entity. So such data may be for an individual or for a state or for a country over some specific periods. That is the time series data. And there is another kind of data that we are dealing with, that is the panel data. That is what it is. It is a combination of cross section and time series. That is both the individual entity and the time, both are varying. Wages over 2001, we get the data of n number of individuals. Wages for 2002 and wages for 2003 for the same person we get. And another information on savings of the same year you can collect. You may not get the some individuals data in some particular period, and on the basis of some unbalanced panel and a balanced panel will be created. And after that, we are going to estimate the model. When we collect the data, suppose we are dealing with the cross-section data, we'll estimate the model, And our model is what? Our model is yi, that is consumption is equal to alpha plus beta, income plus some stochastic part. So what we have to go here, we have to find out the value of alpha hat and beta hat, that is the estimated parameters. And what is the difference between alpha? Alpha beta is what? That is the assumed values, that is the values of the population. But suppose 1,000 people are there in a village, but I collect the information only from 100. So you have to get the alpha hat and beta hat for 100 individuals. But what is the alpha and beta of the 1,000 individuals? That is alpha and beta, the population parameter. For example, in a city, we are going to estimate the relationship between consumption and income. Suppose. So model is this, that is yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi plus ui for a whole city. But we collect the data from some individuals, not from all. If it is all, that is we consider as census data. Since it is a sample, on the basis of sample, we estimate the value of the population parameter like that is stated, that is alpha hat and beta hat. And this alpha hat and beta hat, which are calculated on the basis of chosen sample, these are called sample statistics. Alpha hat and beta hat are what? That is the sample statistics. And what is alpha beta? That is the population parameter. Then we are going to after estimation of the sample statistics, we go to check whether such sample statistics are true representative of the population parameters. They truly represent the population parameters. Alpha and beta hat, whether they are truly represent alpha and beta. This part is known as hypothesis testing. Suppose from the data and regression techniques, here we assume alpha hat, we assume we get 0.5 and beta hat is 0.75. So in our Keynesian consumption function, what do you know? That the beta hat is nothing but the MPC, and MPC lies between 0 and 1, so it is okay. That means, does it mean hypothesis is satisfied? No. Econometric gives us some different, something different on consumptions. We collect a sample size of 50 from 1,000 individuals, and then we get, suppose beta hat is 0.75. Suppose your friend is do the same job and collect a different sample consists of 50 individuals from the same population, and he get the beta hat is suppose 0.005. Your beta hat is 0.75 and your friend beta hat is 0.005. Another friend of you collect the beta hat, his beta hat is 0.004. Then what we can say? We can say that your beta hat 0.75 is due to purely by some chance factor. While it may hold for other samples, is it hold for other samples? Then I cannot rely on the estimate on the basis of the sample. So what we will do? If we, by this way, if we collect such various samples, say n number of samples, and majorly found the beta hat is significantly different from 0, then we say that beta hat 0.75 is not get by a chance factor. That is the statistical significance of beta hat. But we are not doing the by what I'm studying, that collecting different samples and from where everywhere we check the value of beta. We are doing it by some different process. So this is the statistical significance of beta hat. And then what are we doing? Then we considering the predictions. So this income consumption relationship, what we discuss, that is yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi plus ui, it indicates some foundation. Foundation is what? Foundation is this. When we are dealing with econometrics, this is called classical linear regression model. Why it is classical? Classical means it is based on something. It has a solid foundations. That is the classical. And why it is regression? What is the meaning of regression? What is the meaning of regression? Regression means we are tending towards average. We are tending towards average. Regression means dependent analysis. We know it is a dependence analysis, but regression actually means that is we are tending towards average. Why? That is, what is our objective? To predict the average value of the dependent variable given the specific values of the independent variable. Let us consider here in this example, in the top box, let us the weekly consumption of 16 families, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, and so on, 100, 90, 85, and 90. So 16 families weekly consumption is this. So if you find out the mean, if we added all these 16 values and divided by 16, you get the mean value is 73.7. That is the population, that is the sample mean, or the if it is a population, is the population mean. If it is a sample, is a sample mean. But this mean is what? This mean is unconditional mean. Why it is unconditional mean? Suppose I am disturbing this table in term only. I am stating what? I am only stating the consumption. Now I introduce another variable, income. Same table in terms of different income. First group, the income is 60. Second group, the income is 80. Third group, the income is 100. And the fourth group, is income is 120. These are the family income. So for the first group, if we estimate the mean, for the first group, that is 40, 45, 50, 55, that is 47.5. For the second group, it is 67.5. For the third group, that is 87.5, and the fourth one is 91.25. These are what? These are the weekly consumptions of the first group. That means whose income is 60. This is called the conditional mean. But before 73.7, that is the unconditional mean. Conditional means are different from the unconditional mean. If we plot such conditional mean, if we plot all such conditional mean, 47.5, 67.5, 87.5, and 91.25 with respect to income, that is 60, 80, 100, and we get the line, that is the regression line. That is why the regression means we are tending towards average. So this regression, if we are dealing with the population data, then we call it population regression function. If we are dealing with the sample data, then we call it the sample regression function. So such population regressions and the sample regression describing the relationship between the dependent and independent variables, and that is, but not necessarily the form is always like this: y is equal to alpha plus beta x plus ey. It may be different forms. It may be the forms yi is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2 1 by xi. It is called the reciprocal form. If it is log of xi, then we call it semi-logarithmic form. If it is log of yi is a function of xi, then it is called inverse logarithmic form. If it is log yi is equal to log of xi, then it is called double logarithmic form. And log yi is minus of 1 beta 2 into 1 by xi, then it is called inverse reciprocal. And if it is yi is equal to e to the power, that regression line, that is the beta 1 plus beta 2 xi, it is called exponential. And if it is 1 by 1 plus e to the power beta 1 plus beta 2 xi plus ey, it is called the logistic form. So they are the different forms of the relationship. So we have to give some clear idea regarding what is the meaning of the regression. So what is the regression is what? Regression is nothing but the locus of different conditional mean. So how we interpret the beta? How we interpret the beta? Suppose the equation is yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi plus ey. Yi is the consumption, xi is the. If we take the mean values of this, then expected values of the unobserved error become 0, and expected value of yi is given xi, that is alpha plus beta xi. Then to define beta, what we will do? We make a simple calculus, that is expected change of the expected value with respect to the change of x. So this is the average. Here beta hat is expressed for a unit change in x. Consumption changes by beta hat on an average. That is the definition of beta hat. How much time is okay? So here, on an average is an important word. If we define beta hat, that is a unit change in income, consumption change by beta hat on an average. Mind it, we are not write everywhere this. In your research, you have to write these things properly. So here, to estimate beta hat from sample data, we have to measure some change. And the change is with respect to what? With change must be with respect to some reference point. And what is the reference point? Reference point is the sample average. That is the expectation of yi given xi. So the interpretation of beta hat is applicable only for an average individual. Mind it, only for an average individual. Who is the average individual? Average individual may not be in your sample. The person is the average individual whose income is equal to sample average. That person may not be in your sample collections. Just go back to this previous example. In this first group whose average is 60, average income is 60, the average consumption is 47.5. But within this group, no one has the consumption is equal to 47.5. So 47.5 is the consumption of an average individual. And that is called as predicted consumptions. So actual consumptions are what? 40, 45, 55, 50, 55. But the predicted consumption or the consumption of the average individual is 47. So that means when you are dealing with the SPSS, this 40, 45, 50, 55, these are called yi. And 47.5 is what? That is yi hat. That is the estimated, predicted. So these yi and yi hat differs. Why it is differs? There are some predicted errors. That is, this yi is equal to yi hat plus something ui hat. So these are the things, and I'll stop here by giving you some concern about the properties of the regression. First, when you are dealing with the regression, then you must consider the regression relation, that is yi is the consumption and xi is the income. It is called linear. But linear in terms of what? Not in terms of income and consumption. It is linear in terms of alpha and beta. That is the linear. What does the linearity means? It means linear in terms of parameter and non-linear in terms of maybe variables. It may be yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi square plus ui. This is a non-linear in terms of variable, but linear in terms of parameters. So there should be enough variation in xi to be second one is that is x your if all the xi's are equal, suppose all the income data are equal, then what we will get? You cannot get the variation in yi. So there should be when you are going to survey the work, there must be enough variation in your independent variable. And third one is already we discussed, that is the stochastic disturbance mean is 0. And fourth one is this, that is xi's are fixed. The values of xi's are fixed over some repeated sampling, and that is the xi's are exogenous. Number of parameters to be estimated. For example, in our model, yi is equal to alpha plus beta xi, that is alpha and beta are the parameters. Number of parameters to be estimated from the model must be less than the total number of sample observations. That means we are dealing with a huge data set, big data set. When you have two parameters, then you will not get the regression only with two observations. Next one is economic model should be correctly specified. This is a very, very important thing. Economic model is to be correctly specified. If you avoid, it means if we avoid the model of misspecification. What is misspecification? Misspecification means we lost everything. That is what, for example, suppose this is yi is equal to alpha plus beta 1 xi beta 2 xi square. This is the cost curve relationship. This is yi is the cost and x is the suppose inputs used. Suppose it is a labor. Yi is the cost. Now, if I consider this is a nonlinear relationship because yx and then another term is x square, but we consider it as a linear. So we consider the line is a straight line. Actual relationship, it is the U shape. Okay, what is your difference? That is, at these 2 points they are equal, but before this dashed line, first dashed line, what do you find? That the nonlinear curve is greater than the linear one. And what is happening also after the second line, second dashed line, and within the second between these two lines, what actual fate nonlinear relationship is lower in compared to the things that. So that means in linear relations, either we are overestimating or underestimating the cost. A figure in the figure before A or after B, it is underestimating, and between A B, it is overestimating. So this is called model misspecification. So specification is a very, very important part. And if you go to the further thing, then there is a discussion on model specification. Okay, and next one is that the error, what we had talked about, its variance is constant. If it is variance, but in your reality, in your research work, it is quite frequent. You find the error variance is not constant, and then we call the model is suffered by heteroscedasticity. Then there are the several ways you have to remove your error variance. That is the variability of the error variance. And there should be no autocorrelation. No autocorrelation means what? That means errors are internally or spatially correlated. Autocorrelation term is actually useful if you are dealing with the time series data. When you are dealing with the cross-section data, we call it spatial correlation. If there is the spatial correlation between the error term, then you cannot do the you cannot run the classical linear regression model. There are the different macroeconomic time series data. Some external shocks is happening. Financial crisis of 2008, COVID-19 pandemic effects. Suppose you are studying over the GDP growth, then this will affect. This will sustain for some time, after some periods. So it will consider this. It will make the model. It will disturb our original model. And the last one is no multicollinearity. That means if there is more than one exogenous variables, if they are related with each other, then our explanations of explaining the dependent variable, that is disturbed, and that is called the multicollinearity. So these are the basic ideas what I have planned to discuss. And if you have any questions or anything, you can ask. I just apologize.